if I understand right, we're on Canto 3, Chapter 15, text, 31, right? You did 30 yesterday. Things are getting exciting here on the Srimad Bhagavatam. Interesting things are about to happen. The Kumars are about to curse Jai and Vijay. My phone will just... okay, now we can do it. All right. Tabyam misatsvani misheshu nishadyamana. Tabyam misatsvani misheshu nishadyamana. Svartama vyapi hare Svarhatmana hyapi hare pratihara pabhyam. Svarhatma hyapi hare pratihara pabhyam. Uchu suhritam adidrikshita bhanga ishat. Uchu suhritam adidikshita bhanga ishat. Karmanujena sahasata upaplutakshaha. Tabyam nishatsvani nisheshu nishidhyamanam. Svarhattamahya piharer pratihara pabhyam. Uchu suhrittam adidrikshita bhanga ishat. Kamanujena sahasa ta upaplutaksha. Tabyam nishatsvani misheshu nishidyamana. Svarhatamahi hare pratihara pabhyam. Uchu suhritam adidrikshita bhanga ishat. Kamanujena sahasa ta upaplutaksha. Tabhyam mishatsvani misheshu nishidyamana. Svarhatamahi api hare pratihara pabhyam. Uchu suhritam adidriksha bhanga ishat. Kamanujena sahasata upaplutakshaha. Tabhyam mishatsvani misheshu nishidyamana. Svarhatamahi hare pratihara pabhyam. Uchu suhritam adidrikshita bhanga ishat. Kamanujena sahasa ta upaplutaksha. Tabyam nisatvani misheshu nishudyamana. Svarhattama hepi hare pratihara pabhyam. Uchu suhritta madidrikshita banga ishat. Kamanujena sahasata upaplutaksha. Tabyam, by the two porters. Misatsu, while looking on. Animisheshu, demigods living in Vaikuntha. Nishidyamanaha, being forbidden. Su arhatamaha, by far the fittest persons. He api, although. Harehe, of Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Pratihara pabhyam, by the two doorkeepers. Uchuhu, said. Suhrit tama, most beloved. Didrikshita, eagerness to see. Bange, hindrance. Ishat, slight. Kama anujena, by the younger brother of lust or anger. Sahasa, suddenly. Te, those great sages. Upapluta, agitated. Akshaha, eyes. So the verse translates in English as, when the Kumaras, although by far the fittest persons, were thus forbidden entrance by the two chief doorkeepers of Sri Hari, while other divinities looked on, their eyes suddenly turned red because of anger, due to their great eagerness to see their most beloved master, Sri Hari, the personality of Godhead. So we can do this responsively once. When the Kumaras, although by far the fittest persons, were thus forbidden entrance by the two chief doorkeepers of Sri Hari, while other divinities looked on, their eyes suddenly turned red because of anger, due to their great eagerness to see their most beloved master, Sri Hari, the personality of Godhead. Okay, so here is the English translation, or the purport by Srila Prabhupada. According to the Vedic system, a sannyasi, a person in the renounced order of life, is dressed in saffron-colored garments. This saffron dress is practically a passport for the mendicant and sannyasi to go anywhere. The sannyasi's duty is to enlighten people in Krishna consciousness. Those in the renounced order of life have no other business but preaching the glories and supremacy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the Vedic sociological conception is that a sannyasi should not be restricted. He is allowed to go anywhere and everywhere he wants, and he is not refused any gift he might demand from a householder. The four Kumaras came to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana. The word Suhrittama, best of all friends, is important. As Lord Krishna states in Bhagavad Gita, he is the best friend of all living entities. Suridam sarvabhutanam. No one can be a greater well-wishing friend to any living entity than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is so kindly disposed toward everyone that in spite of our completely forgetting our relationship with the Supreme Lord, he comes himself, sometimes personally, as Lord Krishna appeared on this earth, and sometimes as his devotee, as did Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And sometimes he sends his bona fide devotees to reclaim all the fallen souls. Therefore, he is the greatest well-wishing friend of everyone, and the Kumaras wanted to see him. The doorkeepers should have known that the four sages had no other business, and therefore to restrict them from entering the palace was not apt. This verse, it is figuratively stated that the younger brother of desire suddenly appeared in person when the sages were forbidden to see their most beloved personality of Godhead. The younger brother of desire is anger. When one's desire is not fulfilled, the younger brother, anger, follows. Here we can mark that even great saintly persons like the Kumaras were also angry, but they were not angry for their personal interest. They were angry because they were forbidden to enter the palace to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the theory that in the perfectional stage one should not have anger is not supported in this verse. Anger will continue even in the liberated stage. These four merchant brothers, the Kumaras, were considered liberated persons, but still they were angry because they were restricted in their service to the Lord. The difference between anger of an ordinary person and that of a liberated person is that an ordinary person becomes angry because his sense desires are not being fulfilled, whereas a liberated person, like the Kumaras, becomes angry when restricted in the discharge of duties for serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the previous verse, it has been clearly mentioned that the Kumaras were liberated persons. Viditatma tattva means one who understands the truth of self-realization. One who does not understand the truth of self-realization is called ignorance. Or it's called ignorant. But one who understands the self, the super-self, their interrelations, and activities in self-realization is called viditatma tattva. Although the Kumaras were already liberated persons, they nevertheless became angry. This point is very important. Becoming liberated does not necessitate losing one's sensual activities. Sense activities continue even in the liberated stage. The difference is, however, that sense activities in liberation are accepted only in connection with Krishna consciousness, whereas sense activities in the conditioned stage are enacted for personal gratification. Tabyam misatvani misheshu nishidyamanam svarhatama hyapiharer pratihara pabhyam uchu suhrittamadridikshita bhanga ishat kamanujena sahasa ta upaplutakshaha. When the Kumars, although by far the fittest persons, were thus forbidden entrance by the two chief doorkeepers of Srihari, while other divinities looked on, their eyes suddenly turned red because of anger due to the great ignorance to see their most beloved master Srihari, the personality of Godhead. It's interesting that these four Kumaras, they look like young children about 5 years old, but actually they're the oldest beings in the universe. And they were there, and their only purpose was to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But they were stopped by the two gatekeepers, Jai and Vijay. And as a result, of course, we find out that they become angry. Not only that, but in the next few verses we'll discover that they go further and they actually curse Jai and Vijay. Now, I thought I'd add an interesting aside, and that is that in the Madhurya Kadambini, it goes further to state that Jai and Vijay actually prayed to the Supreme Lord to be put in that position. The prayer reads that Jai and Vijay said, "My dear Lord, we see that you are eager to have sporting pastimes in the material world. And we are very powerful, and we have surveyed the material world, and it does not appear that there are any powerful adversaries in the material world. Now, we are very powerful, but we are not inimical to you. But we cannot bear that your desire goes unfulfilled in any way. So if you like, please make the situation suitable so we can help you fulfill your desire." So in other words, Jai and Vijay actually volunteered for the task. And that may seem a little odd. We generally don't hear that aspect of it, but that's expressly pointed out in the Madhurya Kadambini. And I thought that it's interesting how the Madhurya Kadambini parallels and helps to explain a lot of what's going on in this particular section of Srimad Bhagavatam. The confusion can come when we wonder how someone as the question was raised yesterday in Krishna Kripa's class, that how do we understand that persons like Jai and Vijay, who are gatekeepers in Vaikuntha, can make an offense and so on and so forth, And this is why when talking about these issues, I had this discussion with Sumon last week when we were finishing last week's class, because the same issue came up. So I thought I would discuss it a bit, and I think it's an important thing. I have a way of dealing with this by discussing what I call Karma 101, Karma 201, and Karma 301. Like in colleges, they have these various courses, and for the beginning course, you get say like analytical geometry 101, and there's more advanced 201 and more advanced 301. So generally, when we discuss karma, and generally when the Bhagavatam discusses karma, we hear about it on the 101 level, the most basic, straightforward level. That any kind of sinful activity, papa, will result in what we call vikarmic reaction. There will be a negative reaction from the material world as a result of performing sinful acts. And similarly, when one performs punya, or pious activities, there will be a similar but opposite pious refurbishment or reaction that comes from the pious activity. So that's pretty straightforward. Nothing very complex about it. Where it gets complex is that when a person becomes a devotee, and then we move into 201, Karma 201. I'm giving you the Reader's Digest version of it here, the really abbreviated, shortened form. That in Karma 201, actually, it's not karma, technically, because mostly karma is dissolved. And this is discussed in the Madhurya Kadambini, that as a person progresses in devotional service, things are what we call anarthas, or unwanted things, are gradually purged. And there are 5 stages of being purged. One is eko Ekadasha Vartini, which means partially cleansed. Bahudesha Vartini, which means substantially cleansed. The next one is Prayiki, which is almost completely cleansed. Then there is Purna, which is fully cleansed. And finally, Atyantiki, which is absolutely cleansed. So there are these we can see that there's shades of gray here. We're going from, Ekudesha Vartini, Bahudesha Vartini, Prayiki, Purna, and finally Atyantiki, these various stages. And different anartas are cleansed at different stages. So there are, as we know, 9 levels of devotional attainment. We start with, we have first, Ado Shraddha, Tatu Sadhu Sangata, Bhajana Kriya, Tanarta Nivriti Shat, Tanishta Ruchista, Taha Ata Shaktis, Tabhavas, Tata Prema Bhudanshati. Sadhakana Yam Premna Pradurbhave Bhavet Kramaha. So we have 9 stages of devotional service, and these are stages of purification, basically. So first Ado is Shraddha, faith. Then there's Ado Shraddha Tatu Sadhu Sangha, association with devotees, is second stage. Third stage is Anarta Nivriti. And this is the stage where we accept a bona fide spiritual master and we begin to engage in practical activities that cleanse our consciousness. And this is kind of like where the rubber meets the road and where we really hit the skids, generally, because you got to work through a lot of stuff to get from what's called Anarta Nivriti to Nishta, the next stage up. So Anarta Nivriti is stage 3 and Nishta is stage 4. So this is a very difficult barrier to cross when we go from practicing devotional service to being Nishta, steady. And then above steadiness is Ruchi, which is taste. Then above Ruchi is Atta Shakti, which is preliminary desire to serve in a particular role. And then there is Bhava, which is preliminary love of Godhead. And finally, Prema, which is advanced love of Godhead. So these are various stages of devotional attainment. And only in the highest stage is the consciousness absolutely cleansed from all unwanted things, unwanted anartas. In the lower stages, only some things are cleansed to a certain extent. So a person who is a devotee may, as we see as they're struggling to go from anarta nivriti to nishta, may exhibit unwanted qualities. This is not what's happening with Jai and Vijay, but this can happen, and we see it quite commonly happen. And this is why, just as we sometimes have to forgive and turn a blind eye to things that happen to us, that we may see are either unjust, like the 4 Kumaras are judging what is happening to them by being blocked from seeing the Supreme Lord as unjust. So sometimes we have to, just understand that this is Krishna's way of purifying me, that something is happening to me, somebody is falsely accusing me, or I'm being singled out, or I'm being discriminated against, or whatever it happens to be. There's lots of ways in the course of devotional activity that we can find ourselves in some kind of disturbance. And as somebody said the other day, Krishna finds it very, very, I think it was our Hari Vilas said it, that when someone is not disturbed when there's cause of disturbance, Krishna appreciates that quite a lot, So we can understand that sometimes we let these things go, or we try not to think of them in any harsh way, because we know that probably, not even probably, certainly, we are doing that to others as well. So they are forgiving us, and we're forgiving them, like the Lord's Prayer. We forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Same basic concept. So in this way, we are recognizing that we should not take very seriously things that are leveled as either criticisms or abusive words or abusive actions toward us. We should think this is a small representation of something that we should have gotten a much more severe portion of. So these various unwanted things are being cleansed in the heart. And what's happening is actually not karma. Sometimes devotees call this Krishna Karma, because we're still in the category here, Karma 201. So Krishna Karma means that Krishna is directly dealing with us. Karma is a mechanical and judicial system. As I was saying the other day, that there are 33 million demigods. They control the universe in various different ways, on various different levels, various different aspects. And in one sense, at the center of it all is Yamaraj. And Yamaraj is the chief judge of a person's karma. And on his orders and his analysis, other demigods can arrange the material world in such a way that a person experiences the backwash of their activities, their papa and their punya. They get the backwash of it. And so it's partly mechanical, it's partly judicial, kind of just like in a court of law. The laws of Manu have a certain kind of stricture of what happens when a person does X or Y or Z. So this is the way karma works. It's kind of cut and dry. But now when you become a devotee, you've said, "My dear Lord, please save me. I've made many offenses, I've done many bad things, but now I want to become a devotee." And so Krishna and the spiritual master take much of the karma away from the devotee. We know that's the whole idea. Taking initiation, the spiritual master absorbs the karma. And we notice, though, that on the day of initiation, people don't throw away their canes or take their glasses off or suddenly have all their senses immediately rejuvenated. It doesn't work like that. What happens is Krishna is still allowing some of that karma to endure, in the sense that he is metering or mitigating that karma to a certain extent. And now Krishna is using the sort of parallel aspects of what was previously our karma now to purify us in a deeper way. So we have things that are anartas, and Krishna is like a surgeon removing them from our heart through various kinds of vicissitudes that we have to deal with. And so this is part of why our karma doesn't just vanish when we become a devotee. Although in one sense it does. The stricture, the sort of codified law comes to an end when we become a devotee. Now it's being not monitored by Yamaraj is being directly monitored by Krishna. He tells Yamaraj, okay, I'm taking this case. You don't have to worry about this person anymore. I'm personally dealing with it. So we've been appealed to a higher court, and that's what Karma 201 is about. That devotees, they sometimes have, and usually most of their karma is reduced by a significant amount. But Krishna allows some of it to persist. Now, when we start talking about Karma 201, we see that sometimes devotees suffer because Krishna may want to prolong their purification. In some cases, Krishna may want to speed up their purification by even intensifying something that was not such a big thing. As we see, there's examples of that most of the time Krishna minimizes the karmic reaction, but occasionally he does the opposite. He seems to give somebody a double dose for something that was not really generally thought of that severely. There are examples of that. But and sometimes devotees, when they preach or they are dealing with those who are taking shelter of them, they themselves are accepting the karma of the people that they're dealing with. If even a king or a president accepts 1/6 of the karma of their constituents, then what to speak of devotee? And we know the spiritual master takes the karma, of the devotees. So in our trying to help others, we will necessarily experience karma ourselves. So, and that karma is not our own. We are taking karma from others. And of course, sometimes we see that because the material world is here to remind us we don't belong here, everybody gets a nice dose of unwanted, horrible things, because it's just the way the material world is designed. It doesn't matter who you are, you're going to experience negative situations in the material world. So this is all Karma 201. Now finally, Karma 301. This is where what appears to be karma, but actually is not, because it, as Prabhupada kind of hinted in this purport today, that the devotees, especially intimate devotees, are gradually being absorbed and moved into Krishna's Leela. So when Krishna has a Leela, he may want to create a specific thing to occur. And as a result of wanting that thing to occur, he allows what appears to be the devotee to make a mistake, and then through that mistake he's able to accomplish something. Good examples are Jai and Vijay. They volunteered, and through what appears to be a mistake on their part, that they kept the Kumaras from going into the gate of Vaikuntha, they were cursed. They become, first Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, and later on Ravana and Kumbhakarna, and later on Shishupala and Dantavakra, and finally Madai and Jagai. So these they wanted to serve the Supreme Lord in an adversarial role, and they were given that option. And through that, Krishna had fun. He was able to enjoy himself. And whenever there is a purification of some great demoniac element coming into the world, people are purified in a great way. So it served many functions. And of course, another example of the same kind of thing is Arjuna deciding that he didn't want to fight the Battle of Kurukshetra. Appears to be he knew better, but somehow or other he did it. Or we have Parikshit Maharaj, who decided to put the dead snake around the shoulder of the yogi. Again, it was out of character for him, but he did it kind of in this level of karma 301, where Krishna wanted a pastime to take place. It needed a fomenting pretext upon which to actually come into existence, to happen. So this is why Krishna does it. So sometimes Krishna creates these situations that have really nothing much to do with the devotee's karma or the devotee's mistakes. Instead, he's trying to accomplish something, and the devotee becomes the vehicle by which Krishna accomplishes something. So this is, in one sense, the answer to why did Jai and Vijay make the mistake they did? Why did Parikshit make the mistake that he did? Why did Arjuna make the mistake he did? And we can even talk about some other kinds of instances of this. So this is partly the situation here. And we find also that Prabhupada mentions that Krishna is our best friend, Suhrit. And in a lecture, Prabhupada explains that there are three words for friendship in Sanskrit: Suhrit, Bandhu, and Mitra. And Bandhu is an official friend, or someone who's a well-wisher, not very close, but someone who, doesn't want you to be harmed, but, hopes that you're doing well. Whereas Mitra is somewhat of a closer friend, but not very intimate, whereas Suhrit is a very intimate friend, someone who actually feels things the way we feel things and really has our full best interest at heart. So Prabhupada kind of makes that distinction. But I want to leave some time for questions, so let me see. There's a lot more I wanted to say, but the time just zips on by. Let me get the microphone out so our audience out there in YouTube land can also benefit from hearing the questions. I think, David.
Yeah, this pastime is interesting because for the longest time I had heard that there's no fighting in the spiritual world.
Right.
And so that's why this pastime was facilitated. But when I read Brihad Bhagavatamrita, there is fighting that happens in the spiritual world, but it's just arranged by the Yogamaya potency for the purpose of pastimes. So you're making the point that it facilitated a pastime. So it seems like the purpose was not necessarily, Krishna's desire was more in terms of how to liberate the living entities than it was for his own personal enjoyment. So that's at least, of all of his pastimes for his personal enjoyment. Mm-hmm. But it seems like a large degree, these pastimes are there in order to set an example because the pastimes that came about from this are very instructive as well. So maybe you could just comment on some of those pastimes and how they were instructive for the living entities through the different births that Jai and Vijay took.
Well, Krishna does things for multiple reasons. And as you said, I had never thought of it before. But in Adi Leela of Chaitanya Charitamrita, it mentions that Lord Chaitanya comes for what is called in Chaitanya Charitamrita internal and external reasons. And of course the internal reason is that he can taste the relationship that Radha has for him, or in one sense he can understand what it is that devotees experience when they worship him. That's the internal reason for his own pastime. The external reason, strangely enough, is to deliver the living entities, So, but when you mentioned it, I started to think that this is actually what all the avatars do. They do both of these things at the same time. Krishna, he doesn't have to do anything. He's not, the CEO of some big corporation or some kind of titular grand head of some mechanical, mundane organization. Whatever he does partly to enjoy and play around, and at the same time, it also accomplishes something, because he doesn't just do completely idle things that have no purpose at all in any way, shape, or form. And even more than that, Krishna is able to accomplish 5 or 6 or 10 different things at the same time. So each of these stories, and that's why I think they're so interesting, has various levels and angles you can analyze them through. This place that we're in the Bhagavatam right now, what are the themes here? If you want to look at them, some of the themes are gradually going from impersonalism to personalism. That's what's happening with the 4 Kumaras. They were impersonalists. And then later, when the Supreme Lord appears, they smell the tulsi leaves offered to his lotus feet, and they become personalists. So that's one of the themes here. Another theme here is the idea of people blocking, the Jai and Vijay blocking the 4 Kumaras from, and we as devotees see that sometimes officials of various sorts keep devotees from doing what they need to do. You can't go here, you don't have a permit, you're blocking traffic. I've spent a lot of time in jail. I lost count, but I haven't spent time in jail for long periods of time. But it's always where some event, the people come and say you can't be here, you're illegal, and then you get processed. It takes half a day, and finally they let you out. But that's another angle of looking at it. Then there's the angle of what are we learning about the material world? Here we're learning about the material world and about the Vaikuntha worlds, how the two are different, how they're interrelated. We're also learning about how the Supreme Lord does things. So there are many layers of themes, and in one sense, you could talk about it for a long time, because there's all these different things you can bring out. And I just kind of had to pare down to this basic theme of karma, because I thought this was a question that people wanted to know about, and I wanted to kind of discuss it, because to understand that there's levels in karma is an important thing. Otherwise, you don't have an answer for the why bad things happen to good people question, which seems to be a perennial favorite in our everyday world. People ask that question all the time. So this is why, because even Krishna's pure devotees, they have to struggle in the material world. Other questions we have from Arjuna Nand over here.
So over there we see that Krishna is saying you have to surrender completely unto me, then I remove all your actions. So my question was, how much of a devotee should we be before Krishna takes the reins of our life and he takes control of our lives?
Well, he's already doing it, but it's a kind of two-step. Krishna is helping us, and to the extent that we are cooperating with Krishna, to that extent we'll make progress. And just because it's an important point, Prabhupada always mentioned that the quality of our japa is probably the most important, element of our sadhana, our purification. So if you want to know where you get the most bang for your buck, it's, in working on, improving your japa. I had wanted to, it's just, I'm amazed, it just shows how the false ego is. When I'm in class, it just seems like the class just goes on forever. But when I'm giving a class, it seems like it shoots by. So it just shows how much false ego I have, But at any rate, I wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that there's thinking, feeling, and willing, that we know things conceptually, but unless we do things tangibly, physically in the outside world, it doesn't count for much. That's why there's so many religions in the world, and yet the world is in the mess that it's in, because people have some abstract notion of religion, But religion is achar and prachar, so it's action and preaching. It's, or as they say in Christian circle, it's praxeology and doxology and theology. So besides just theology, you have to act or practice. Because if you just know stuff but you don't do anything about it, there's no difference between you and someone else, So through action, we actually begin to change inside. First of all, we have to know what's the right thing to do. So if we know what's the right thing to do, then in the outside world we act in a way that gradually will cause purification to take place. And as purification takes place, our internal world starts to change, and the spiritual world becomes gradually more and more manifest internally, to the point where we become eligible to participate in Krishna's pastimes. So, but all this is most significantly affected by the process of working on trying to hear the holy name. Okay, so we'll let Sumon talk, and then we'll cap
Maharaj, a quick question from the purport. Prabhupada is writing that sannyasi can demand any gift from the householder.
Right.
And householder should be able to give whatever he demands and should never refuse whatever he demands.
Right.
That looks little...
Watch out, those sannyasis. Yeah, who can know? Right, so at any rate, the idea, of course, was here that children can go anywhere. I wanted to talk about that because, I'm amazed as a child how I went anywhere, I had the opposite of helicopter parents, If my parents knew what I was up to when I was little, they would have, I would have been locked inside with chain on or something like that, because I did the most crazy things when I was little, And I guess Krishna understood that I was going to become a devotee later, so he allowed me to live through it. So I'm here to tell the tale. But otherwise, the one thing that it really struck a chord in my mind this morning was I was thinking about when, after we would go to church in a town that was about 15 miles away, or something like that from where we lived, my mother always wanted to drive around and see something new, so we would drive around and see something new. And we lived in rural Missouri, there was a lot of forests, and those forests, they would have fire towers. And I don't know if any of you know what a fire tower is, but it's about 100, 200 feet up. There's this tower, and there's a little building or booth up there, and you walk up these stairs, and at the very top, there's usually a fire ranger up there, and there are several of them, and if the fire starts, the fire ranger calls to the other fire ranger, and they have a little wheel with compass points on it. So person in one fire tower says, I see it at northwest at 15 degrees or something like that, and then the other person, the other fire tower, so I see it and then you can draw on a map and find out where those 2 points converge, and that's where the fire is, so they can send somebody there. But I remember going up those stairs, and they were just metal stairs with just a railing, and I was must have been like 7 or 8 or something like that. And actually, I must have been older than that. Must have been like 10 or something like that. And you're walking up this, what parent would do that these days? And my father was there, he went up there too. And my sister, she was like 4 years younger than me, and she would go up, and it was just all you could do to keep the vertigo from getting you, because you're looking down, and it's like, like these people who do parkour these days, or that kind of stuff, where they, climb up, towers or something like that. But somehow or other, we would do it. Then you'd go up to the top and you'd talk to the guy and the ranger didn't mind. It was a completely different world then, and sometimes there was no ranger. You could just get into the thing and into the booth up there and look at it. And so, children are allowed to do a lot of things way back when, which I don't think children at all are able to do these days. But it was a different world. So anyway, now that was just a pointless aside, but maybe it was somehow connected with today's verse, with the fact that children are usually not stopped from going anywhere. And if they are, children, whenever they're stopped from doing anything, they get angry. Even little tiny children, whenever you stop them from doing anything, immediately they get angry. So anyway, thank you all very much for your kind attention. All glories to Srimad Bhagavatam, all glories to the devotees of the Lord. Hare Krishna.